Welcome back on the Good Morning Artesia radio show. Got you up to date on the news and the weather and the sports and the markets and all the other crazy stuff going on. We have the mayor with us, Raye Miller, and we're talking about the city council meeting last night. And before we get back into it, I know you've been very complimentary of one of the major projects that's going on in town with what Holly Frontier's doing with that new biodiesel facility that they're building out there, and that is such a tremendous project, and that's going to benefit Artesia for years to come as they make that major investment in our community.
Well, yeah, it winds up being a thing where if you look at economic development in our community, so much of our ups and downs have been related to oil and gas, but truly through the years, folks like the Yates Petroleum family, which they are still very active in multiple entities, even though EOG bought a lot of their assets. But then the refinery has been just a stalwart backbone for years. And this project, I believe, was $350 million with the biodiesel. And it's in the middle of the plant, the actual unit. But then, they're building all of the stuff on the south side of the highway where, a rail spur, loading car facility, unloading, loading, and it's a thing where there will be employment or additional employment, both on the south side as well as in the new unit, besides what the traditional plant actually has. So it's really a great thing for the community, and there's a lot of folks who are actually staying in motels and stuff here in Artesia at this point because they're related to the construction, and the refinery also has a turnaround coming this fall, which will actually add additional folks in. In fact, I anticipate it'll be hard to get a hotel room or a seat at the restaurant this fall. So I guess the theory there is we need to eat early and often because it may be hard to eat out
when the crew change
comes
goes.
About. Yeah.
Well, it's another reason too to hopefully encourage folks to get back to work. I know, we've all tried to support as much as possible our local restaurants, and it's just been a challenge for them to find people to work in those restaurants. And I know there's a push to have us be nicer when we go into the restaurants, but it sure be nice if some folks would consider going back to work.
Yeah, it would be a thing where I'd hope that anyone who is currently not working would actually, because there are jobs open around our community and everyone needs good help. I know whether it be, the folks in the oil field. I know Wilbanks is trying to hire drivers because they have more work in moving rigs and some of their new wind turbine activity that they need qualified CDL drivers, and yet there are still folks that have been laid off that have not returned back to work, and it would be great if the folks who have the experience and all, because that way the amount of training is so much less, they become a much more productive asset. But anyway, it is what it is, and hopefully as life becomes more normal, everybody will become back to a normal working profile. So.
Sure. Well, let's get back to our council meeting.
Yeah, we wound up, we had several things that wound up having some discussion last night. Rocky Hawker came in and visited with the council about the new soccer and football facility out there and what they're looking at in the way of proposed fee structures for actually utilizing the facility, daily fees and league fees and type of stuff, and then allocation of those funds. And, it's a thing where initially when it was presented to the council, we largely made sure it was clear to the folks that the city doesn't have the funds available to, quote, operate an additional facility. If you look at the aquatic center, it's a great thing and it's tremendous for the community. And I mean, my grandkids love the time that they're spending over there this summer. But it winds up being a thing where, and we've had folks explain to us that our fees that we charge are too high. Well, unfortunately, even with the good utilization, the high fees that people see, it winds up being a thing where at the end of a 12-month period, that facility is projected to lose about $400,000. And thankfully, each year after all of the income has been accounted for, and as a result, currently the schools help the city with some maintenance subsidizing of that, and then the remainder comes out of the city budget. And so there's certainly a cost to the taxpayers for us being able to have that type of facility. And so when the folks came and talked about the new fields, the council asked that we not wind up having monetary obligations to the operation. And, it was perceived that the football leagues and the soccer leagues would basically do the maintenance and monitor the fields to make sure that they were kept in good shape and that people didn't bring their dogs in. And, and that's why it's completely fenced around. But anyway, I know Rocky has, with the new facilities, wanted to be able to actually open it for more public access. And so they, are looking at fee schedules, and they have an agreement with memorandum with the city, which we've actually adopted at our last meeting and signed. But anyway, the fee schedule was on the agenda last night, and basically he identified, what he's trying to do. And right now I think he's trying to actually look at being open 6 days a week from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. and then 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. Well, that requires them to actually have someone there all of those hours so that, they can make sure that folks are not bringing in items that could actually be harmful. I don't think sodas, are good for turf. I don't think.
But you mentioned the dogs.
The dogs and stuff. In other words, they won't let people with dogs in because they don't want the dogs to possibly urinate or drop other deposits on the field.
Yep.
Because that works on the plastic, type thing. And certainly, I mean, the fireworks that occurred out at J.C. Park, not the nice display, but some of the private, Rocky was a little bit dismayed about some of those that actually wound up on the field and caused some issues. But I don't think he was aware that the city council had actually adopted a restriction of no fireworks at J.C. Park the meeting before the 4th. And certainly folks were using personal fireworks out there in the parking lot near the tennis courts. They should have been reported to the police and stopped, because it's a thing where it's the reason that the city adopts that is because of safety to the folks who are out there to enjoy the beautiful fireworks display, and also to protect the park from, things like that. In other words, we certainly don't want to wind up setting the turf on fire, because plastic probably melts and burns.
Right. But, well, I know it melts, and so that's.
But anyway, after some good discussion last night, and all the council actually backed off of what we were hoping for, because part of the fee is being set aside into what we call a restoration fund, because just like over at the pool, there was a recommendation from the donors that in operating the pool, that each year the city set aside an amount very close to $100,000 per year, because at some point in the future you're going to have some major things that need to be worked on, and as a result, if that happens to be a bad budget year, you don't want to wind up having to close the pool just because you don't have funds available. And so the city has actually been setting aside $100,000 each year that the pool's been open, to actually try to build a fund to actually help with those major repairs. And of course, Rocky had approached the city about charging fees to participants so that we could actually set aside some money into a restoration fund. And last night, given the fact of the unknowns of how much expense and all that he's going to have in trying to, quote, operate, then the council actually just requested and basically voted on a 25% of the fees, because I think they're looking at charging, a fee besides the normal soccer league fee of about $50 per person or per participant in the league. But then actually $12.50 of that for each participant will go into this restoration fund that will hopefully build up over time to be available for needs for either major repairs or at some point a complete relay on the field. But I mean, the cost of that field is just, right now, I think if you took that turf up and put new turf down, you're talking $1.2 million. Well, it's a thing where if you don't set aside some fairly sizable dollars, as my folks who used to play canasta and had a spit tune by the thing, it wouldn't make a spit in the bucket if you don't put something fairly sizable into the deal. And so that's certainly the concern of the council. And also, the counselors are very concerned because of the cost. If a family has 4 kids and they want to play, both football and soccer, that's $100 additional fee per child, $400. And I know, thankfully, the community of Artesia has been really good with helping, youth activities be sponsored and help with sponsorships and help folks, because we certainly don't want the cost of an activity to be the deterrent of kids actually being able to participate. But it's a thing where I know that in this next year, there'll be a lot of folks looking for help and sponsorship for those league activities.
So when the people pay the fees, is the city acting as the fiscal agent for that?
No, actually,
or they're just kind of overseeing it?
Actually, it's just an agreement, but the funds will actually be maintained for that particular fund under the agreement with the Greater Artesia Foundation.
Okay.
Now, I think Rocky is in the process of setting up another foundation to actually do the operating of the facility, but even under that, he will still, from that operating foundation, transfer those fees that are going into the restoration fund, and it'll be maintained at the Greater Artesia Foundation, which puts it in a very secure place, very accountable, such that it's there for in the future. Greater Artesia Foundation's been around for a long time and is a very stable foundation, well managed, and meets all the requirements of the.
Not even the governor can get her hands on those funds right there. So you don't have to say anything, Mayor. I
got to be politically correct. I was afraid last night when I made some comment about the pigeons that the newspaper would be putting it in the paper. I says, sorry, I wasn't politically correct there.
Okay, well, don't say it here,
right?
Because it'll be out there. So, very good. All right, where would you like to move to next?
Well, the next item that came up after Rocky was there is a proposal that has come before the Recreation Commission to actually set up a disc golf course out at J.C. Park. There was a good presentation done to the Rec Commission, and it was on our agenda to possibly consider approving an MOU with the group that actually is doing that. They're raising private dollars to actually do all of the construction and all out at the park. We asked questions about, is there any ongoing additional cost to the city maintenance to where these facilities cause us to have to weed whack instead of mow. But Byron with the Infrastructure Department Land Fair explained that he did not believe the area that they would be using that's actually inside some of the grass area would actually cause any additional problems for his folks that are mowing, which is, I mean, some of us are very concerned about what the cost of operating things are. But anyway, unfortunately, the memorandum, there was a draft prepared, but it was not anything that actually the city attorney had done. Our city attorney actually had some heart issues and wound up having some heart surgery done this last week. And so as a result, we didn't feel comfortable actually not having, the agreement actually reviewed and probably at least some parts of it redrafted by the city attorney prior to entering into it. So it was postponed until the next council meeting, and the fact that he's recovering from heart surgery, it may actually be the first meeting in August before that actually comes forward. But anyway, there was, didn't seem to be any disagreement with actually allowing it to be done. There were some layouts and stuff that were included in the councilor's packet, and like I say, it had been reviewed at the Rec Commission, and they seemed to think it would be a really good thing. And there is evidently some groups that are very active in that type of activity. And, I mean, we're looking to provide activities, particularly ones that get everybody out in the outdoors doing things instead of sitting at home doing video games.
Right.
I mean, I'm the prime example of one who needs a little more exercise. But anyway, that was good. We also had a brief recreational marijuana update because the city needs to be working on any type of ordinances or statutes related to the location of those type of establishments here in the future. And I would certainly like to see us get things identified early as to if we have restrictions, so that if someone's looking at trying to open one of those businesses in our community, they don't wind up finding a location and then figure out that the city actually doesn't allow it at that location. And so we've got Community Development Director Jim McGuire in fact, he had a copy of the draft, I think, that Roswell is looking at adopting. There's a Zoom meeting this next week that I know he'll be in attendance on. And then I think he's looking at having his planning committee actually involved in the drafting of these regulations in conjunction with the judge, the chief of police and stuff, just so that everyone has had a look at what we're actually considering and then bringing it forward to council at some point. But I hope that within the next month or so that we actually make some good progress on some of this, because I really don't want folks who are considering, being in that type of business to not have ample opportunity, because I think the licenses for establishment are done like April of next year. Well, it would still be good because it takes time with commercial facilities to actually get those set up and put together.
It'll be interesting. A couple things on that will be interesting to see, because from what I understand, there's no opt-out option for municipalities or counties. You can't pass an ordinance and say we're not going to have any of those here.
Right.
That's not allowed. So
right.
you have to say, okay, if we're going to have them, they're going to be here and not here. That type of thing.
Yeah, around schools, around churches, possibly some of your cultural districts. I mean, we have the Arts District and the downtown Main Street. So I don't know. The only other thing we had last night was.
But on the marijuana stores, the other thing that's going to be interesting to see is this going to generate, for lack of a better word, mom and pop local establishments, or is this all going to be operated by these chains that are already kind of in the medical? I mean, we don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see whether actual, honest to goodness, local run establishments are created by this, or it's just all these chains that come in. And so we've got chain restaurants, we've got chain retail stores, and now we have chain marijuana
Yeah,
stores.
but occasionally, I mean, like right next to our office is the smoke shop, which, I mean, basically they sell primarily cigarettes as their number one item, but they have a little drive-up window and there's a line of cars.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, I mean, it's certainly possible that some of the local folks will be looking at this as an opportunity, and, you know, I mean,
it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
We have snacks at council meetings. I told them, who knows, after all this becomes legal, maybe our brownies will be a very passive crowd at the council meetings.
That's a good one.
The last item we had last night was there was actually a Eddy County declaration of local flood disaster that the county commission approved. And of course, they're very good to both make city of Carlsbad aware of it, as well as some of the smaller communities, as well as us, to advise us that they were in the process of adopting it. They have adopted it, and it gave us the opportunity, if there were issues, to then apply to FEMA and some of the federal agencies for help. But Byron Landfair reported last night that whereas I think Carlsbad has had some significant issues because of the recent flooding and all, we were very fortunate. Our rains here, while they were plentiful during that time, and there was a lot of water that moved down Eagle Draw, it was managed to the extent that we really didn't see any damage from all of the rains to any of our infrastructure. Certainly causes some issues out at like the wastewater treatment plant and all, but it wasn't a structural type of damage. And so as a result, we appreciate what the county did, but unless someone can identify a problem to us that has occurred that's related to the city's infrastructure, we're not aware of it, and as a result, we've advised FEMA that, you know, we don't have any claims coming or possible requests for help from the city. But I do appreciate the county making it a county-wide effort, not just, you know, Southern Eddy or whatever, because certainly there was some larger volumes of water that moved through at pace.
Through
the city of Carlsbad.
Pretty crazy. And I know Roswell's had their issues too. And even this past Sunday, the storms kind of were in the Roswell area and Dexter and that area and didn't quite make it down here. So.
I was watching and expected us to just get slammed. And right as it came towards Artesia, it kind of split, and the larger part of the thunderstorm went between here and Hope. And in the fact that all the folks that I know in Roswell were telling me about how bad the hail was, I'm like, oh, well, that wasn't a problem here. We were lucky enough just to get enough moisture to actually get my garden to think it got some good natural moisture, and
well, good.
It's growing like crazy.
There you go. Well, Mayor, as always, thank you so much for your time. You guys meet again in 2 weeks, right?
27th, I believe. Unfortunately, Mayor Pro Tem will be handling that meeting because I'll be in Alaska. So
well.
He already is aware that he's in charge and will be coming to see you hopefully on Wednesday morning if he remembers.
Well, he will do a fantastic job. We always appreciate when Terry comes by. So, Mayor, thank you very much. And you have a great week and rest of the summer and enjoy your trip.
Thanks.
All right. We're going to